Rene Couture blasts Tito down, and he's got him right in side control. Let's take a look at what just textbook side control is going to look like here. So first things first, the side control can only happen when your hips are past your opponent's hips. So notice our legs are past Tito's legs, Randy's legs are past Tito's legs, and his hips are past his hips. Typically side control, the bodies are perpendicular to each other, making like a right angle or anywhere between like 135 degrees and 45 degrees. We're going to make sure that we're staying chest to chest with the opponent. By staying chest to chest, we're making him carry our weight, and he's going to stay down on the floor, much easier than if we allow a lot of space there. Now, just like I was talking about from half guard, you're going to apply shoulder pressure to the opponent from side control in order to staple their face looking over to the left or away from you. I guess it could happen on the other side as well. When this happens, their communication with their brain through their spine is dramatically weakened, right? That signal just isn't as strong traveling through the spine, and it takes a lot more effort to be able to move or do anything on the part of the bottom man. And I'll explain the spine thing later in a later video. Now with that shoulder pressure in place, making his life a living hell, this is when we tend to start putting our knees into the position that we want. So notice the knee positioning here. We've got the left knee underneath the shoulder, in this case the right shoulder of Tito Ortiz. That's going to isolate that arm. That's going to make it much harder for that arm to be able to do anything. The second knee is in the hip of Tito Ortiz. In this case, the right knee is in the right hip of Tito Ortiz. That knee there is going to really make it so you have control, or at least a sense of what Tito's hip is doing, because you're going to need to have a sense of that hip to know when he's escaping. Here's a beautiful shot of this pin from another angle. Look, we really have that shoulder pressure bearing down, and the right elbow is controlling the left hip of Tito Ortiz. The combination of the right knee from the other side as well as that elbow are really making it so that hip has a tough time moving. All of these actions are what makes what I'd say a classic side control. A classic variation of side control is called two arms in front. Two arms in front is a pretty standard variation of side control. You look at like a side control textbook, odds are you're probably going to find some variation of two arms in front in there. Basically what happens is the opponent starts off flat. You've got this nice classic side control going. That's when they turn in. This is a great block for when the opponent turns in, and you need one of those because when they turn in, they cause trouble. Dan Hardy's going to go to bridge and turn in. Notice where George's arms are now. He has a cross face, as well as his right arm being in front of the opponent's hip. This position here is what we would consider two arms in front. Another pretty classic variation of side control would be the opposite. This would be double arms past instead of double arms in front. In this variation of the technique, you reach two of your arms to the side furthest away from you instead of bringing them to the side in front of you. What this variation of the technique is good for is isolating that arm. So for things like Kimuras, Americanas, straight arm locks, this is a good side control variation to go for those types of moves. Now, we know that when they turn in, they start to cause trouble. And usually when they turn in, they do so with this annoying frame across your neck. So notice BJ is turned in towards George. And really the thing that's allowing this is this frame he's got across George's neck. That thing is so annoying. Let's look how George clears it. Pay attention to this left hand here. This is the hand that's going to be doing the action. What he's going to do is first lift his hand up. He's lifted it away from the hip, and he's going to bring it in, slipping it underneath the hand that BJ is using as a frame. You see that there? With that neck blocked, we've got a forearm on forearm situation here, and BJ actually gives up the frame for a second. During that time when BJ gave up on his frame is the time that you can see George moved his head back into position in order to flatten BJ. So he's gotten the cross face back and his elbows back in the original side control position. Now he's going to really pin him down and put the shoulder pressure on as well. So his weight's down, BJ's flat, the shoulder pressure's coming. Now that frame is like significantly less powerful. So the frame isn't gone, but if you can get him flat, that frame doesn't mean a whole lot. In fact, you can see BJ gives up on it there. So I'm going to call this a hip lift. And it's a way to really shut down guillotines and regain control. So notice Tito's turned in to Randy. And what they do is they throw on this annoying guillotine choke, right? Like, they're not going to get it, but they're cranking on your neck and they're holding on for dear life. It's annoying and, you know, it could potentially be dangerous, so we've got to remove it. First thing we do is we put a strong crossface in effect here. When you do that, make sure that the crossface sucks. Make sure it sucks more than whatever he's doing to you with that guillotine choke. And here's where the hip lift comes into effect. Notice, Randy is going to reach inside of the thigh of Tito Ortiz. He's going to lift that up as he drives his knee underneath the hip of Tito Ortiz. When he puts that down, Tito is going to be flat. Tito is going to be no longer a little bit turned on his side to work that choke. He's going to be flat. And people that are flat, well, they can't really fight back too well. And if you notice, when he's flat, the guillotine's going to feel useless to him. And that is when he's just going to give up on it and Randy pops the head out. So, knee from side control. Usually if you're kneeing someone from side control, that means you're significantly better than they are. It starts from being flat. Remember, good things happen to those who get their opponents flat. One knee moves in more towards the center, which is going to give you the positioning that you need in order to lift the left leg in this circumstance up and drive that in to the opponent's ribs. I think it is also definitely worth noting here that George is staying glued to him this whole time. That chest on BJ never really lifts up. Now we're going to see some big knees from Randy, right? Notice these guys are staying flat, keeping them down chest to chest as they throw these knees. Watch. George is going to get him flat, chest to chest, bring up the knees, staying tight the whole time. You're going to be playing on top. You got to know how to hip switch. You just got to know this. Pay attention to George's hips here. Notice his right hip is up, right? So his hips are not square on the mat. The left one is lower than the right one. What he's going to do is switch his hips and get his hips square onto the mat. Notice that? That switching from one up to square, that is what I would describe as the hip switch. Notice he switched again. BJ was going to get his guard back, and to prevent that, George switched his hips as kind of a block to that guard coming on. The hip squared position is called side control, but the one hip up position is usually referred to as Keiza-Katami, scarf hold, or in this case, a modified scarf hold, because we have the underhook. Scarf hold is typically done with a headlock, but modified scarf hold is done with the underhook. Take a second to appreciate this shin pin here. Completely isolated in that arm, opening up a big shot. Notice, we went back to side control. The hips switched back to square. If the two hips are down, then that's side control. If one of the hips is up higher, that's typically Keiza-Katami. Let's just look at a sequence of beating someone up. Right? How are we just going to hold them down from side control and beat the crap out of them? Let me start by saying this. Angle seems to be of the utmost importance. So what George is going to do first is shift himself over to the left. When he does that, he's creating what I would call more of a 45-degree angle versus perpendicular versus BJ Penn. That seems to open up the right hand in this circumstance a lot more when you're more at 45 degrees versus perpendicular. You can watch that play out a little bit here. I think whenever you can, you want to throw on things that make them miserable, because misery is going to force them to act. You want to actively make them uncomfortable, and you want to make the way they're uncomfortable lead into a way that is dangerous for them. So here, you see BJ has brought the arm back down, right? That was so uncomfortable, he had to use all his might to bring his arm back down to this position. When he does that, George retains the 45-degree angle, and now he's going back to beating up BJ. And one thing you're going to notice is BJ is now defending with this left hand, right? Because it was so miserable, BJ had to defend with his left hand. When BJ defended with his left hand, his left elbow came up. And when that left elbow comes up, it clears the way for George to step in with his right leg and continue to isolate that left arm. He's drawn all these reactions out, and he's slowly walking BJ into a position that is worse and worse and worse. See, that knee comes up. Now that arm is really in trouble. This is a trapped arm now. It cannot do much to help BJ anymore. George also makes things more and more trapped. Notice he's wrapped his arm around in such a way that BJ's hand is stuck underneath George's shoulder. That hand is really locked up now. And because BJ is more turned on his side, that hand being locked up is a big key in defending yourself. If you're turned like that, he can't defend himself. That punch is coming right for him. Cool little trick to get this guy back flat again. Watch, he reaches over, right? He's trying to escape by turning away from you. And, you know, this is a great time to punch him, as is. So George St. Pierre is going to start off with a big punch here. And notice afterwards, immediately he goes to threaten the armbar. Well, when you threaten the armbar, actually the way to defend it is by going down flat. So BJ is just going to flatten himself back out here. Sneaky little way to get him back down flat. When he goes back down flat, that's a good time to clock him. That's a good time to clock him. While he's still thinking of defending the armbar, that is a good time to blast him. And George really goes off here. After he flattened him back out from the armbar, having to switch from like jiu-jitsu mode, stopping a submission, to stopping punches, people kind of lag a little bit. Notice a big knee on belly here. You know things are going well for you if you're able to establish a knee on belly and the other guy can't do shit about it. Now, when they start to turn in, a couple things to remember. Crossface and hip control. These are always great tools. Stay low and stay flat. Try to trap him from coming up any further. And if you can actually get him stuck in this position here, then you can rain down a variety of damage. Face is completely exposed. Look at that face on BJ. Look at that, that face, man. Oh, I love you, BJ. Don't be mad at me. But that just describes the kind of damage, the kind of recklessness. Jesus.